Hello guys, and welcome back to DarkHorse FM, and in today's video we're going to be looking at the key elements that make up the perfect midfield in Football Manager 2022. I'm going to be using extensive research from all the tactics that I've checked, all the OP tactics in Football Managers that have been released in recent months, in particularly this year's game FM 2022, but these principles may also work in FM 2021 and FM 20 as well. So in this video I'm going to be sharing with you tips on how to create the best midfield pairings and midfield trios or duos in Football Manager 2022, and indeed any other FM game that you're currently playing. That's because these tips and principles do work. It's a football principle. Basically, they're just key elements that you actually need to have in your midfield that can actually make them formidable. And then I've gone through most of the OP tactics, like I told you guys already, and then I've seen that there's this similarity between the midfield combinations of player roles that are actually in the midfield that kind of have these player combinations that make the midfield exceptionally successful. So I'm currently in my Admira Waka save in Austria, and by the way, if you're new to the channel, remember to hit the subscribe button and also turn in the notification bell so you can get notified when new videos like this come up. Here at DarkHorse FM, we normally make football tactic videos for Football Manager 2022, and we'll test a lot of Football Manager 2022 tactics as well that have been successful even in the past as well. So before I share the elements with you, I'm going to actually convey something that is probably obvious for most Football Manager players, but if you're not already aware of it, I'm going to share with you that there are two main combinations that you can use in Football Manager midfield pairings. That you can use the duo or the midfield trio, like I mentioned before. And in some cases, if you're actually a crazy person like me, you can use 4 players in midfield. And if you're completely bonkers, which is like most of the very best Football Manager players are, you can use just the one midfielder in central midfield and then you'll be doing just fine. But let's look at how the combinations of these key elements in midfield work together, and then we can see how Football Manager roles can help you recreate these elements in your midfield. So these 4 key elements, I'm going to split them into player types, right? You're going to need a creator in your midfield, you're going to need a runner in your midfield, you're going to need a spine for your midfield, and you're also going to need an engine room in the midfield as well. These 4 key elements can help you create the most successful midfield in the game that is actually formidable and also very, very difficult for the AI to play against. So the first person we're going to look at is the creator. Currently in my Waka save, I actually threw this tactic. This is not actually a real tactic in the sense of the word, so I just threw this in just to actually explain to you how the midfield sort of works. So the first person you're going to be looking at is the creator, and then this guy is either in the number 10 position, as we have this Vod Hanel in this number 10 position, or you can also have him in a slightly deeper role, like in a flat 4-3-3 in some sense, where you have these other 2 players out wide. You can just have the creator. This player's responsibility is solely to actually create chances for the team. Now in Football Manager, you can use the deep line playmaker role on support duty. If you're using him on defend, he's going to play a slightly different role, which is tricky in FM. That's why you notice that most players actually tend to use the deep line playmaker on support duty. Another creator you can use is the Metala on support duty and attack, but the issue with the Metala is he's not very defensive, so you're going to need to have another player beside him that is probably doing a lot more defensive work while the Metala is in there. Another key creator in the side is the roaming playmaker and the advanced playmaker as well, but the advanced playmaker is pretty obvious. A role that is not really, or that I'm going to say is an unsung hero in FM 2022, is the central midfielder on support duty. I like this role because basically you can ask this guy to do anything. You can ask the guy to be the playmaker, you can ask this guy to be the ball winning midfielder. He has no instructions in his default settings, so you can just ask him to do anything. So that's basically how you can set up. First of all, you need to have a creator in your side. This guy can be the advanced playmaker or a roaming playmaker or a deep line playmaker, or basically a playmaker in the sense, or a central midfielder that has been asked to play a bit more risky passes into the opposition's territory to try and unlock the defense. The second player you're going to need that is a key element in Football Manager's midfield in Football Management midfield, is the runner. With the issue with the runner is, now I know I did mention that the roaming playmaker is an ideal creator for your side. Funny enough, he's also a runner. The way the roaming playmaker is, this guy is like it's seen in the description, that he's a player that actually drives the team forward and tends to run and break the opposition's defensive line, or break through the lines basically. So a runner is a player that is solely responsible for stretching the player, or stretching the pitch, stretching the opposition's team, stretching the play vertically and horizontally. By stretching the play, his movement is responsible for pulling away the opposition's defense, pulling away the opposition's player out of their normal position. So they tend to try and follow him, right? So wherever he's running to, you need to have a player marking him, or else he's going to score a goal. But that way, this player actually draws opposition defenders to him. So this player needs to carry a threat, so you can't just use any random person to be running around, because not those kind of players that just run around and they don't create any chances, or they don't score goals when running with the ball, something like that. So you need to have someone that is actually a threat to the opposition to actually play in the runner position. So the AI actually has to mark that player and then has to send somebody to stop his runs. That way it creates room for other players in other areas and then opens up spaces by stretching the play in that sense. That's kind of how the runner works. And then with the roaming playmaker, that's one person I mentioned. Another player that is a very good runner in FM 2022 is the central midfielder on attack duty. Apparently it's probably one of the best runners you can have in the game. Another role you can use as a runner is the box-to-box midfielder. I could have mentioned the Carrilero in a sense, but I'm going to explain to you why the Carrilero is not really on my option as the runners. Although the box-to-box midfielder has the ability to get into the box and back and get into the defensive area as well, the Carrilero is quite different, so I'm not going to really class him as a runner. He does the running, but he's just limited to he doesn't get into the box, not like the box-to-box midfielder. So he's basically running up and down on the halfway line here and just trying to, it's like a shuttle. Yeah, that's what they call it, the shuttler. The third element, and most people probably say this is the most important element in the midfield, is to have a sitter. You can have a sitter in a midfield 3, you can have a sitter in a midfield 4, or you can have a sitter in a midfield 2 or in a midfield 1, like I explained. But the sitter is basically the player that doesn't get forward. This player's responsibility is just to hold the midfield and be the sole player there. You can use a deep lying playmaker on defend duty. You can use a central midfielder as well on defend duty. This player can operate really like a sitter. In the old days when we had a flat 4-4-2, when it was just 2 strikers and then the 2 wingers, and then you had 2 midfielders in central midfield, it was really tricky to have who was going to be the sitter. But then back in the day, if you did have 2 central midfielders on support duty, you would probably realize that the central midfielder on support is going to operate between support and defense. So that way, when one person goes forward, the other person acts like a sitter, and if this other guy goes forward, then the other person acts like a sitter. But nowadays, there are more designated roles really, so you can use a deep line playmaker on defend duty. While this guy is on defend, he's not going to really get forward. Like it says here, on defend duty, the deep line playmaker will fulfill extra defensive responsibility and will really look to get forward to support those attacks. So he's going to act like a sitter. You can use this guy in the defensive midfield position as well. There isn't any problem there. And the more especially, he's actually going to be responsible for just staying and protecting the defense and then trying to stop this attack and then release the ball to a more creative player that can create chances for the team. The fourth element that I'm going to mention, I can't really call it the final element because I'm sure there are a lot of elements to midfield that I have to admit in Football Manager that I probably don't even know about them yet. So there's a lot more we're going to actually learn in Football Manager as the more we continue to play the game. So looking at the central midfield, I do have a 3 here. It's probably one of my favorite shapes really. But the last element of the midfield that we're going to look at is the engine room, like I mentioned. Now the engine is the guy that is the most energetic player, and he's probably tasked to be the one that's going to stop the opposition from playing and try to win the ball back as soon as possible. This player has a similar manner. He has a similar manner to the runner in the case that in his own case, he's not going to be the only threat that he is posing is to stop the opposition attack and win the ball back from them. So that's they have to kind of avoid him when they're playing. So the objective of this guy is to just win the ball back, and he has to be aggressive and be very good at tackling. The kind of player that comes to mind is a ball-winning midfielder. But I have to admit, you can use a box-to-box midfielder to play as an engine in your team, where you ask him to try and win the ball back as soon as possible, thus adding the tackle harder, close down more instruction to your box-to-box midfielder. A central midfielder on support duty can also act like an engine in your team. And to be honest, the player needs to have specific attributes that actually allow him to play that position. Now I've actually done a quick pick for my squad, and then I have a ball-winning midfielder in there. So my AI assistant manager, I have to admit, is going to choose the best player that can fit the ball-winning midfielder role. And looking at the attributes of this player, you can see that Felix Bogner has aggression 11, so he's probably one of the better players with high aggression. He's a wonder kid as well. Look at those star ratings. Wow, I need to actually take a closer look at him. Dennis Prower is a central midfielder here. He has low attacking and low aggression as well. So your ball winner, your engine in your team has to be a player that has very high aggression. Looking at Buckman here, he has low aggression as well. There you can see that Bogner is the one player that has the highest amount of aggression between the three of these players. So you're going to want your ball winner, your engine in that sense, to be the player that has very high aggression, very high work rate as well. You can see the work rate is up to 12. He's probably going to improve a lot. And then you just have determination as well. I almost forgot. And tackling, marking, defending. These are all instructions or attributes that actually help the ball winner or the engine to try and play in midfield and be a bit more of a threat to the opposition and try and stop them and win the ball back. So when you do have a midfield three such as this, it's quite easy to fit in three of the elements I just explained to you, and then maybe ignore one of those elements depending on the players that you have in your team. But what will happen if you have just the flat 4-4-2 and then you have two midfielders? In this case, a 4-2-3-1 still has three midfielders in midfield. So I'm going to make it a 4-4-2 flat, just to try and clarify. If you have two midfielders, how are you going to include all the elements in that sense? Like we explained earlier, if you're using two central midfielders on support duty as well, you can actually ask these players to behave in a certain manner. That way you can choose to have a creator in your side, that's having your central midfielder on support duty act like a creator by asking him to take a bit more risk when passing the ball, and then try play a bit more direct passing, and then maybe not get into the box too much. You can ask him to hold his position in that sense, and then since he's being the one playing more direct passes and trying to unlock the defense, you now have this guy act like a runner. Then he can, press the opposition a lot more, and then be the one to also move into channels and get into the box. Like I already included, move into channels. You can also ask him to get further forward, but I'm going to leave this one blank. I'm just asking to move into channels, because the get further forward instruction asks him to always be in the opposition territory over like 90% of the time. That's not what we're looking for. So we want him to only move into the channel when that opportunity presents itself. So having these two players, this one is going to be the one moving into the channel, and then the other central midfielder is going to be the one holding his position and then being the creator. So this guy obviously is acting like a sitter and the creator at the same time, while this guy is acting as the runner and the engine at the same time, asking him to close down more and then move into channels. That's basically kind of how you can set it up in the 4-4-2. But there are many ways you can go about playing it in Football Manager, and I'll probably love to enjoy how you guys set up your midfield in FM 2022 as well. So off the bat, I'm also going to look at Football Manager tactics, OP tactics that I've looked at in previous years, or in previous months, on FM 2022, and I'm going to show you guys how these elements have been included in those tactics that are somewhat rated as OP tactic. Now this is an FM22 tactic, beta Madaze Hatta tactic. I think this is a NAP tactic 4132. It's one of the early tactics that came out in FM 2022, but just looking at the way the tactic is set up, you can see that there's a holding midfielder here. So this guy is it's like the spine or the sitter in midfield, and then you have a runner in the shadow striker, which is going to get into the box and try and help the attackers, the two advanced forward, try to create chances and score more goals. In this case, we don't have a midfielder stretching the play. That's because two of the wide players are playing as wingers, so they are stretching the play in this sense. And then you can see that you may wonder if the deep line playmaker here on support duty is going to be isolated, but that's not the case, because there are two inverted wing backs on support duty that are going to get into the midfield and try and help out the defensive, or try and help out the deep line playmaker when the team is in possession of the ball. When they're not in possession, it probably explains why the two wingers here are on support duty. They are also going to help out defensively because they are on support duty. So it's going to form sort of a 4-3-3 when they are in defense, but that way the wingers are going to be closing down the wide areas in this sense. Looking at GYR FM's GROGU Grogu FM 2022 tactic, I know this one looks a bit wonky, but it kind of explains what I'm saying here. You have a sitter in the defensive midfielder on support duty here, no instructions, so he's going to act like a sitter. Occasionally he's going to push forward and try and support the attack, but then you have a box-to-box midfielder here that's been asked to get further forward. The box-to-box midfielder is also going to act like a runner in the team. Looking at the attacking midfielder here, he's going to be the one that is acting as the creator. You can see that he has more direct passes included in his player instructions. There's a complete wing back, and then there's also a fullback on the taxi. So these guys are going to be the ones stretching the play, even though the box-to-box midfielder is going to be running at the defense and then getting to the box and stretching the play. So the tactic is somewhat set up to kind of include those key elements that I was mentioning in the previous minutes of this video. The last example I'm going to be looking at is Stephen HK's chicken wing tactic for FM 2022.3. This tactic also has an attacking midfielder on attacking team. This player is going to be the one taking the risk. He's kind of acting like a creator in the side and also moving into channel. So while he's acting as a creator, he's also acting as a runner. So it's possible to kind of combine both elements in one player or in 2 or 3 players in your midfield. In this case, you have a central midfielder on support duty. This guy is going to mark tighter and tackle harder, kind of acting like an engine in midfield, but it's also helped by the box-to-box midfielder. So there's a lot of running in this tactic as well. So this what Stephen HK does here is to include 2 runners, or a runner and an engine in the midfield, and then he has a creator right ahead of them that is also acting as a player that can stretch the play in this sense. So guys, these are the 4 key elements that you can include in your midfield that can actually help you dominate the midfield in this sense and try and outplay the opposition as many times as possible. So remember, you need to have a creator in your midfield, you need to have a runner, someone that is stretching the play. You also need to have a creator in your midfield. I already mentioned creator, right? You need to have a creator, you need to have a runner, you need to have an engine in the midfield that is a powerhouse, the guy that's going to try and run all over the place and win the ball back and stop the opposition from playing. This guy is going to help out in attack as well. And the last player you need to have is the spine, or your sitter, the player that is the holding midfielder for your team. This guy doesn't have to be in the DM role. You can have him in the central midfield role as well. He's going to be the one that's responsible for staying in the midfield so you don't get outnumbered. That way he's going to help out and stop the opposition's counter-attacks at source and kind of play simple passes, the more creative player. So the sitter's role is just to be in the midfield and be an extra number, an extra body in the midfield that stops you from being outnumbered in the midfield, and he helps out both in defense, in midfield, and in attack when the opposition presents itself. So guys, if you found this video useful, remember to hit the subscribe button and also turn on the notification so you can get notified when new videos come up like this. I'm going to look at more OP tactics or trending tactics in Football Manager. I'm going to share with you, and I'm going to share with teams that are somewhat not predicted to finish in the higher echelons of football. So those guys, you can tell that that tactic is probably going to work out for your team if you try it. So we're going to be looking at the mid-table sides, the lower division sides. I was going to test out tactics for them and see how well they do with those tactics. So I'm going to catch you guys in the next video with another outstanding tactic, and I'll see you soon.